The following is a presentation on Measure U, the taxpayer's right to know and vote initiative. The information on Measure U is taken from a report prepared by an independent fiscal expert, as authorized under state statutes. The city's information program provides information on the effects of Measure U as determined by the expert. The information program cannot advocate either for or against the measure. Measure U is scheduled for the June 3rd statewide primary election and will be the only Signal Hill measure on the ballot. Measure U is sponsored by Signal Hill Community First. If passed by the Signal Hill voters, Measure U would require a 2/3 vote on city fees, taxes, and assessments. The expert found that voters would be responsible for making technical and interrelated fiscal decisions. Measure U would reduce the ability of the elected council and city staff to manage the city's budget and fiscal affairs. Instead of the 5 elected city council members making fiscal decisions on behalf of the city, Measure U would require 2/3 of all voters to take on this role. On February 18th, the City Council adopted a resolution to oppose Measure U. Voter elections would be required for dozens of fees which are currently determined by the City Council. The fees range from water rates to charges for library books, to false burglar alarm permits, to vehicle impound fees and fees charged for park and recreation programs. Measure U would impact the City Council's ability to implement fiscal policy consistent with the city charter and state constitution. Each individual fee increase would require an election, requiring 2/3 voters' approval of the fee. A simple example includes the overdue book fee for the library, which is currently 35 cents per day. If an adjustment is needed to cover growing expenses at the library, an election would be required. So an increase as little as 1 penny would require approval by 2/3 of the voters. Measure U has a long-term effect of causing a decline in the city's financial ability to provide the high quality of services currently provided and valued by our residents. How will Measure U impact the budget? The city has a $16.4 million general operating budget. 43% of the budget is dedicated to public safety, and 23% of the budget is devoted to public works, including park and street maintenance activities and graffiti removal. The expert found that the initiative would annually impact $2.1 million of the general fund. The impact to the water department, which is separate from the general operating fund, will be $3.5 million or 100% of the department. As you can see, this chart illustrates the financial effect that the initiative will have on each department. Specific general fund impacts are $452,641 to the police department, the equivalent of 4 full-time police officer positions, and $772,621 to the public works department. A major portion of the general operating budget pays for Signal Hill's excellent police services. Currently budgeted at $8.1 million, Measure U impacts over $450,000 of the department's budget. The independent expert found that over time, the initiative would impact the ability of the city to recover cost for services and eventually erode public safety programs, especially proactive patrol programs. The city would also be unable to provide matching funds for state and federal law enforcement grants. The department currently has officers and operations funded through grant program. Measure U does not contain an exception on how Signal Hill will deal with emergencies, such as earthquakes and public disturbances. For example, Signal Hill sits atop the active Newport-Inglewood earthquake fault. Earthquakes can collapse water wells and rupture water mains. The expert found that the city may need the ability to raise water rates while repairs are underway. Instead of a fast-acting city council, a special election would be required with a 2/3 vote. Election law would result in a delay of 88 days for an election where 2/3 of the voters would need to approve of the repairs. The fiscal expert found additional impacts, including the fact that the Measure U would sunset all fees in 10 years. Also, voter elections would be required for other important items. Several of the city's existing fees have automatic increases to deal with inflation. These include the franchise fees for oil pipelines, the oil barrel tax, and permits and licenses. These would include fees charged to oil companies such as Tesoro, Texaco, and Signal Hill Petroleum. Also, Economic incentives to maintain or attract certain businesses would be difficult to implement in a timely manner. A recent study revealed that 40%, or $7 million of the city's general fund revenues, are the result of projects assisted by city and former redevelopment agency. These businesses have created over 1,860 direct jobs, not to mention the positive economic spin-offs. The city has one bond, which financed $10 million in water system improvements over 15 years ago. These water systems improvements were necessary to support new homes, parks, and sales tax generating businesses. It was determined at the time that the most advantageous bond payments to the city were based on the issuance of 30 years bonds. Measure U would limit future city councils to 20-year bond payments, limiting flexibility. The city's financial policies state that the city shall maintain a combined general fund reserve and economic uncertainties reserve equivalent to a minimum of 6 months' operating expenses. These reserves serve as insurance against unforeseen financial demands that could result with the loss of a major sales tax producing business or responding to a natural disaster such as an earthquake. At the end of fiscal year 2013, those reserves equaled $11 million, or 61% of annual operating expenses. The fiscal expert feels Measure U may require the city to allocate reserves for operational purposes during and between election periods. Over time, this would reduce the city's reserves, potentially creating a vulnerable fiscal position. The expert found that 90 homes in the California Crown neighborhood would be impacted. These homes currently belong to the California Crown Landscape and Lighting District. This is the only landscape and lighting district in the city. The district provides for the maintenance of landscape areas, like the landscaping on Temple Avenue. The current total annual property owner assessment is approximately $55,000. The property owners approved an annual CPI adjustment. It appears that Measure U would require a 2/3 vote of the entire city to approve the annual assessment, instead of a vote by the California Crown property owners. The expert found that there will be additional costs to government if Measure U passes, including the need to add the equivalent of 2.5 people to the city managers, finance, and city clerk's offices. For example, the finance department will require a full-time budget manager, and the city clerk will require a part-time person to manage the many items that will need to be placed onto the ballot. The added staff costs are estimated at $400,000 annually. The city has been moving towards a 2-year budget for efficiency purposes. However, the expert anticipates that Signal Hill will have to implement 6-month budgets due to the uncertainty created by the voting requirements for fees and assessments. Other costs are related to the elections, including legal costs and fiscal expert reports on proposed fees that are estimated to exceed $75,000. The fiscal expert also anticipates that the city's legal costs will increase, including potential legal costs over interpretation of disputed provisions of Measure U. Proponents state that they are concerned over assistance to future developers. Individuals concerned with this issue could vote on future development incentives. It should be noted that the city's municipal code requires public hearings and fiscal reviews prior to any grant of economic assistance by the city. Proponents also believe that Measure U is consistent with existing state laws, including Proposition 13 and Proposition 218. Proponents believe that Measure U does not apply to California Crown Landscape and Lighting District and only affects new fees, taxes, and assessments. There are legal issues with Measure U that have been identified. First, it is unclear if Measure U applies to the California Crown Landscape and Lighting District. Second, many taxes, fees, and assessment are regulated by state law. However, the city charter can be more restrictive than state law. Third, Measure U states that it applies to a fee or charge for services and benefits to mitigate any activity. This language could be applied to fees such as vehicle impound fees or burglar alarm fees charged by the police department, as well as other city fees. Fourth, there are a series of inconsistencies with state laws, including Proposition 218. And fifth, there are no legal precedents or cases that would guide interpretation of disputed provisions of Measure U. In the opinion of the independent fiscal expert, Measure U would fundamentally alter the management of the city's municipal finances and budget planning by impacting the City Council's ability to implement fiscal policy consistent with the city charter and the state constitution. The experts also noted that over time, requiring a vote to adjust fees for enforcement activities could impact the city's ability to recover costs for services and potentially erode public safety, especially the proactive patrol programs. The city commissioned an independent polling firm in order to determine the community attitudes and needs as part of the update of the city's strategic plan. The survey results showed that 75% of the Signal Hill residents believe that the city is headed in the right direction. This is much higher than many communities. Residents commented that they overwhelmingly want the city to continue to deliver a high level of services. This includes police and public works services. What else did Signal Hill residents say? 84% of residents view the City of Signal Hill Police Department positively. 72% of residents positively view the City of Signal Hill Parks and Recreation Department. 71% of residents believe the city is well run. 69% of residents positively view the Signal Hill government overall. 66% of residents think Signal Hill provides better services than other nearby cities. And 62% of residents positively view the City Council. Information on Measure U is available on the city's website and at the Signal Hill Library. This includes the text of Measure U, the fiscal impact report, and fact sheets. The city has also established a Speakers Bureau, where we can provide information on Measure U to your neighborhood, homeowners association, or organization. Please contact us at 562-989-7305 if you would like a presentation.